Welcome to the Global Learning Office's GLOVicariously webinar series. Today's topic is Borders, Commerce, and COVID-19, the tense relations between Costa Rica and Nicaragua. To introduce our speaker, we have student alum Safal Doumre, a student who studied in Costa Rica in 2019.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. This webinar will last approximately 1 hour with a presentation followed by Q&A. All participants will remain muted, so feel free to send in any questions to the chat Q&A. You can find the Q&A person there, and I will collect them to answer after the presentation. You are welcome to turn on your cameras or keep them turned off. We will also launch a quick poll at the end. Today's speaker is Javier Arguedas. Javier is a lawyer and political scientist and has been the co-director of the Institute for Central American Development Studies since 2018. Prior to this role from 2008 to 2018, Javier was the academic coordinator of the CCCU Latin American Studies program. Since 2015, he has also served as the legal advisor of the Honor Tribunal of the Professional College of Psychologists of Costa Rica. Previously, he was also the secretary of the Criminal Chamber of the Supreme Court Justice of Costa Rica for 15 years. Javier has developed a great experience as independent consultant of alternative conflict resolution, both at the national and international level, in programs such as Alternative Justice Center of the Bar Association of Costa Rica, Alternative Dispute Resolution Consultant in Rule of Law Project of Nicaragua and the Judicial Reform Project of Nicaragua, Consensus Building Project and Alternative Conflict Resolution in Central America and Dominican Republic Consultant for the University for Peace, United Nations, Project State of the Central American Region in Sustainable Human Development, Chapter of Institutional and Citizen Challenges Consultant for United Nations Development Program, and Alternative Resolution of Conflict Consultant for Project of Judicial Reform of El Salvador. But Javier has been a professor on political negotiation areas. He holds a Central American Master's in Political Sciences, Graduate Studies System of University of Costa Rica, and professor on training and certification of mediators and conciliators for the Bar Association of Costa Rica. Javier is also the co-site director for GESI Costa Rica. But don't let all the accolades and accomplishments fool you. Javier is one of the most grounded people I've ever met. I got the pleasure of meeting Javier through GESI in Costa Rica last summer. In those 2 months, Javier showed me the finest cuisine, the richest coffees, and showed me the most beautiful places in Costa Rica. He taught me the history of his country and introduced me to amazing people that do incredible work. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my friend, Javier Arguedas.
Gracias, Safal. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys. Some very familiar faces. And again, it's an honor to talk about what is happening here in Costa Rica in these challenging times. Let me see what happened. 3 or 4 months ago, Jessica asked me to do this presentation. And at that moment, the big situation in Costa Rica was the situation that was happening with transportation in the border to Nicaragua. So I would like to use this situation as a case of study to talk about something more important, which is the way that we should treat other people, especially in these difficult times of pandemic all around the world. Costa Rica could be a good and bad example about the way that we should treat people in this situation. So let me start saying that when this situation started, it was the following. In May, the government imposed measures to restrict the entry of cargo carriers at the borders, both sides, Panama and Nicaragua. And Nicaraguan government responded with the similar measure for Costa Ricans. What happened at that moment? What happened was that drivers of these trucks came from Nicaragua, from the Nicaraguan side, and many of them at that moment, almost every single driver was infected by COVID. In Nicaragua, they didn't do anything with these people. They just allowed to move the goods in their trucks with any kind of health measure. When they arrived to Costa Rica, Costa Rica did the test of COVID, and they had to spend 1 day in the border for the results, and most of them have the disease. So Costa Rica decided to provide the health services to these people, but these people didn't need to move the cargo that they carry. The problem was that the government of Costa Rica said, no, you cannot move until you are healthy. So you have to spend the time, the quarantine in some place. They didn't have, the drivers didn't have places to stay. Costa Rica opens what is called a center for them to stay there, but they try to avoid the quarantine moving because they need to move the cargo that they had. The situation was very tense at that moment. For 9 days, the borders were blocked, and at that moment, you can see a line of 10 miles of trucks either side of the border, of people waiting to move the goods that they were transporting. The problem with this situation is that the 20% of the goods in Central America are transported by land from Panama to Guatemala. So it's a lot of movement, a lot of merchandise, and this generates a lot of problems with the products, because the products cannot move, cannot reach their destination, and it generates at that moment a lot of losses for the owners of these products. Then, let me see. The situation at the Nicaraguan border is very interesting for many reasons. Costa Rica decided in March 60th to close borders, to generate a series of restrictions of entry for of foreigners due to the expansion of COVID. From this moment to until a couple weeks ago, 16,000 of people have been rejected in the northern zone. So in most of them Nicaraguans. In Nicaragua, the situation is the political situation and the health situation. It's very difficult right now, and Nicaraguans try to move to Costa Rican side just because they are political persecuted or because they are in difficult economical situation, or because they need to try to survive, just to survive. The problem with this border is that this border is so big, I mean big, but by this area, We are talking about more or less 200 miles, more or less, but with a geography very diverse. So there's a lot of bland sites in this area in which people just move freely with any restrictions. I mean, people who don't have any kind of documents just move around the border. What is the historical context in which this situation is happening right now? Well, Costa Rica, since the 40s, past century, had the highest growth in Latin America in this period of 40 years period. This was consequence of a political stability, a social investment, and what we call a social welfare state model. As you maybe know, maybe don't, I don't know. Excuse me, my phone rings. Costa Rica was the first country in the world that abolished the army. And this was a situation that transformed the way that we understand the role of the state. The money that was used at that time for army was moved to social investment, education, healthcare, infrastructure, you mentioned. So we create a society, a very strong middle class society. And this was important because during this time, nobody in Latin America lived as well as Costa Rican did. I always say that I am the result, the product of this situation, because my grandfather was one of the poorest guys in Costa Rica when he was young. But the model of state provide conditions to live better. My father lived much better than my grandfather, and I have lived much better than my parents, just because the way that the state invests in people. For example, my first degree as a lawyer, I went to the best university of Costa Rica, University of Costa Rica, which is one of the 5, let's say in the top 10 universities of Latin America, one of the top 500 around the world. And I went there and I didn't pay a single penny for my degree as a lawyer. The government paid me. They pay for tuition, for food, for transportation, for everything. And I became a lawyer thanks to this model of government, of state. The way that we are dealing right now with the COVID is the consequence of the measures that we took as a country during the 40s in this period. In this same period, what was happening in Nicaragua was totally the opposite. As you can see in the first image, there's 3 persons there. They are a family. It's the Somoza family. Anastasio, the father, the first Anastasio Somoza, Luis Enrique, the older son, and Tachito, Anastasio Somoza Jr., one of the most violent dictators in the history of Latin America. these three guys, this family rules the country of Nicaragua during 50 years without any kind of possibility of a democratic system. They were very violent, and this situation produced a very situation of social exclusion. There's rich people, the Somoza families, some militaries, and the rest of the people in Nicaragua live in conditions of poverty. You have to remember that I'm talking about the period of the Cold War, and in this Cold War, the United States was very interested in maintaining control over the region, the backyard, as many people said during this time. We were the backyard of the United States, and the United States government supported this situation. And the situation of violation of human rights was something very present every day in Nicaragua. I always talk this, I always mention this story because it's just one example of what was happening during this time in Nicaragua. This is the story. It's a brief tale story. It's not a tale story. It's true, but reflect what happened in Nicaragua during this time. In Managua, if you have been in Managua or you go to Managua, you will see that Managua, the capital city of Nicaragua, is a flat city. It's totally flat. There's only one hill, which is Tizcapa Hill. In Tizcapa Hill, Somoza, Tachito Somoza, built the presidential palace during his administration. So you can see the presidential palace all around the capital. A mansion. When I say the presidential palace, I'm talking about a palace. Is not an euphemism. Is like that, a palace. And in this place, Anastasio Somoza used to have very interesting parties every other month or so. He used to dress as a Caesar, Roman Caesars, and the guards, the National Guards, they were dressed as a Roman soldiers. So they have a party there with the most important guests for Somoza, one of them, the US ambassador. And they used to have a party there, prostitutes, champagne, caviar, this kind of crazy things. At midnight during this party, they used to go like to the basement of this place. This place was destroyed by the earthquake in 1972, I guess. But if you go there, you can see in the basement, which is part of, it's located there, torture chambers. And in these chambers or cells, Somoza used to have for this party political prisoners, not delinquents, just regular people who oppose the system, social workers, professors, physicians, students, things like that, people like that, like this, regular people who oppose the system. And they used to have 3 cells, one with the political prisoners, the second one empty, and the third one with lions, with tigers. So the cherry on the top of the cake for that night was to have like a Roman circus. And in this Roman circus, they basically open the cells and the tigers attack, the lions attacks the people. The lions always win. This is the level of violation of human rights in Nicaragua during this time. After the 80s, in Costa Rica, we get into a economic crisis with social stagnation. But during this time, Costa Rica was used by CIA to destabilize the Sandinista revolution. During this time, the Frente Sandinista overthrew Somoza and start a revolution. But immediately, the CIA, the US government support the contra-revolution movement. And Costa Rica was used during this time for those purposes. In 2007, Ortega get in power. And from this moment until now, he has been in power. Some people say this is a democratic system and it's okay that Ortega is in power, but for many people, this is like a return to the Somoza situation right now, because they have been using the political and democratic system to maintain illegally, some people can say, the power. So with this panorama, we arrive to the coronavirus and the situation in Costa Rica. What's happened with migration, Nicaraguans migrating to Costa Rica? Most of the Central American citizens used to go to the US, but not Nicaraguans. If you see Guatemalans, Salvadorians, and Hondurans try to move to the US. But Nicaraguans don't do that. Nicaraguans come to Costa Rica. They migrate to Costa Rica. In 2010, we are a 5 million of population, and more or less, like 100% of inhabitants in 2010 were immigrants. And from this population in 2010, 97 of this population were Nicaraguans. This situation have changed a little bit because in the last 10 years, we have a movement of Venezuelans, Colombians, and Dominicans coming to Costa Rica, but the statistics says that the majority of immigrant population is from Nicaragua. They just come to be, as I told you before, they come for political reasons, the situation, the political situation in Nicaragua, for economical purposes, because they can make a better life in this country, and because we need them, and this is important, and this is the part that many people don't say. This labor force is so important for the economy of Costa Rica. But this conversation is full of xenophobic narrative, and I'm going to refer to this situation in a couple of minutes. So, what happened during this pandemic? Right now, we have 20,000 of people that have had the COVID. 27% of these infections are from foreigners. The information that the Ministry of Health give about foreigners is not divided in nationalities. But the because the level of population of immigrants, foreign immigrants in Costa Rica, most of them are Nicaraguans, and because two phenomena that involve directly Nicaraguans, the situation of xenophobia have arise again in the country. The first situation that happened was a situation that happened a month ago, more or less, month and a half, in which the north zone of Costa Rica has a how would you say brote, a what's the word? Let me think.
Brote is outbreak.
Outbreak. This is the word. Thank you, Jessica. An outbreak of COVID in the northern zone. This area is an area in which the companies that produce pineapple, yuca, and different kind of products use Nicaraguans for the production of these products. The conditions, the working conditions in this area are terrible. I mean, it's a totally violation of the basic rights of workers. They pay less than the minimum. They work in very, very difficult conditions. They live in what we call cuarterias, small shacks, small rooms in which, let's say, 2 meters square, in which 10, 15 people live in the same space with any healthy condition. So this outbreak of COVID appears in the area, and this whole area, it was a health crisis at that moment. And the finger were put into the Nicaraguans, not in the Costa Ricans, in the owners of the companies that mistreat these people, but in the Nicaraguans. They are the responsible because blah, 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 blah. This was the first big moment. The second one happens, it's happening right now in San Jose. San Jose right now is the center of the pandemic in Costa Rica as a consequence of very difficult conditions of in marginalized communities. Marginalized communities in which many of Nicaraguans live there. Not only Nicaraguans, Costa Ricans too, but they don't have the conditions to have a adequate quarantine. So the spread of the virus has been very difficult to control. And again, the finger has been put in the Nicaraguans. The problem is not the Nicaraguans. The problem is the conditions of marginalization in which these people are living right now. The third situation right now is what is happening until today in the border. A lot of Nicaraguans who were living in Panama, because the situation in Panama is very difficult, they decided to come back to Nicaragua by land. Costa Rica created a humanitarian bridge with the idea that they can move to the border in Peñas Blancas. And when this group of people, we are talking about between 300 and 500 Nicaraguans, when they arrived to the cross border, the government of Nicaragua decided to don't allow to get into nationals from Nicaragua, don't allow to get into the country. So they have to stay in the Costa Rican side. If you see this picture, you see the people and you see a tents with plastic bags. This is the place in which people are living right now. For more than 15 days, these people have been living there without any kind of conditions, just because they don't have the possibility to prove to the government of Nicaragua that they don't have coronavirus. The responsibility of the government of Nicaragua could be do the tests. But the problem in Nicaragua is that nobody knows what is happening with the virus. The government gives some information about the virus, but the social civil organizations have totally different numbers about the crisis in Nicaragua. So the government of Nicaragua refused to let them get into the country if they don't have the test. After many days of tension, the government of Costa Rica decided to do the test. So many of these people with the test can get into the country, but there's a lot of people contagious with the COVID. So they stay in the border. Costa Rica is opening right now a center for them to be there and treat them for the virus. So what in this reality, what I try to point the finger in this situation is that you can see a lot of parallels between the reality of Costa Rica and the United States. When we see numbers, who is affected by this virus is the population who has been historically marginalized in the US and in Costa Rica, mean Afro-descendants, this population. And again, despite the fact that the Costa Rica is doing very good the process of treatment, because we have a public and universal health care system, it's true that the COVID is affecting this marginalized population. And in this reality, what I can see is that this COVID brings out the best and the worst of the humankind. In one hand, it shows solidarity of the communities toward those most in need. In the case of Costa Rica, the government has been doing an effort with these immigrants. I think it's not, it could be better, the effort, but it's doing something. But in the communities in Costa Rica, you can see how people try to be in solidarity with the people. You can walk around the communities and you see these banners in the corners, in some corners, with baskets with food. And the banner says something like, if you need it, take it. If you have it, be in solidarity, bring food for the people in need. So you see people passing through this basket and taking food because they don't have ways to provide food for the family. And you see people putting food in there. There's a lot of initiatives in which Costa Ricans have been in solidarity with brothers and sisters. This brings hope in many ways. But in the other hand, my reflection is about how this system, economical system in which we live, is a system based in social exclusion. The way of the system works in terms of consumerism, this is the main base of the system. And we cannot maintain this system in which there's a lot of losers and so few winners. We need to think in transform this model. And I think this pandemic has been a teacher about the necessity of rethink the way that we live. We need to think in more communal ways to live. We need to think in more, the concept is bioregionalism, to produce for our own region and not depend of the way in which commerce has been globalized. And at the end, the last thing that I want to share is the problem, this tension, this historical tension between Costa Rica and Panama will be like this for many, many years. It's part of the tension, despite the fact that we, as a citizens, we try to live better than the way that governments behave. This is my presentation, and I would like to open this space to comments or questions or whatever you.
So we got one question. What is access to healthcare like for marginalized populations in Costa Rica?
Yeah, I mean, as I told you, the health system in Costa Rica is public, is free, and is universal. It's for everybody. And in this moment of the pandemic, everybody is getting access. Everybody. I mean, right now, 2 days ago, Costa Rica decided to open borders for Canadians, Europe citizens, and they need to bring to the country with a insurance. They have to pay an insurance. But for the people who are living here in Costa Rica, even immigrants, it's totally free, it's a universal access. Right now we have, let me see the numbers. I have the numbers. 300 people in hospitals, treatments of 15 days, more or less, the rate of they go there, they don't pay anything. Public and free. We solved the situation of healthcare much, much better than you many, many years ago.
We have another question. Prior to COVID, was xenophobia relatively common in Costa Rica, or was it a result of the pandemic?
No, I would say this is like a movement, like waves. Every certain times when something happened and people became very, very xenophobic. Again, we are the Pura Vida country. This is our slogan. We try to be very polite with people. But in this discussion about foreigners, when the discussion is about Nicaraguans, people tends to be very xenophobic, and it's a shame, but it's part of this historical context.
Another question, what has been the experience of testing and contract tracing in the country?
Well, has been very successful until 15 days ago, 3 weeks ago, in which we lost the trace of COVID. That's why the government decided to strengthen the restrictions. I have been for the last 3 weeks here in my house. I mean, without any kind of chance to move. I can drive my car 1 day a week because there's a restriction based on the number of plates, these kind of things. Right now, the problem is the tension between the owners of the entrepreneurs and the health situation, because people say we need to open commerce because we need money to survive. But the government has been taking measures very slow, try to control the situation. And the numbers, the last week, we reduced the rate of contact between people. So we are doing pretty well right now, again, I would say.
One other question, to what extent did the transportation issues you mentioned affect COVID-19 related supply chain for protective equipment, medical supplies?
Well, no, this is not a problem because this kind of supplies come to the country by plane. I mean, the problem that we face with goods and commerce by land is very specific for different products, basically food products, but the medical products are transported by plane, and the government open the borders for this kind of commerce.
How do Costa Ricans know how to identify Nicaraguans? Is the problem mostly class-based?
Yeah, I mean, it's awful. I don't like to talk about this because it's xenophobic. We Costa Ricans believe that we are light skinned. We are the Swiss of Central America, the Switzerland of Central America, and we are whites, according to many people. We are the whites, they are the browns. And I mean, Safal, you were here. What you say about this? I would like that you give us your opinion about this issue.
My host mother in Costa Rica was actually from Nicaragua, and my host father was from Costa Rica, and there were some subtle differences in accent. They said you could tell, like, by words that you say certain things, you can tell when somebody is from a certain region. But other than that, I think it is like mostly just xenophobia. Just like there isn't a real much difference. They say that they are supposed to be darker, but like you can't really tell the difference, or at least I couldn't, as a foreigner, I couldn't really tell who was who. But yeah, I think it's just like mostly just like xenophobia.
Yeah, it's very xenophobic view based on race, based on the color of your skin, which is, yeah, awful.
We got another question. How do you imagine COVID will influence the growing biotourism industry within Costa Rica?
Oh, this is the question right now. There's a lot of pressure inside the country and outside the country to open borders for tourism. 2 days ago, we received the first flight from 240 people. Were there, were arriving to visit Costa Rica during this time. And this, the Minister of Tourism says, this is a test to see what is going on. I would say this will be a slow process. I don't think that we come back to the previous normality until the next probably 2 years. It's my bet. I would say it will be a slow process, but definitely is the most important service, the most important source of revenues for Costa Rica. So we need to go in this direction.
From your perspective, what do you anticipate will be the greatest long-term impacts, positive and negative, of the global pandemic for Costa Rica?
Well, the economical crisis. I mean, right now, 25% of the labor force is without work. It's just surviving, and we need to rethink again the way that we as a world produce, what kind of production, in what way. We need to rethink our economical system all around the world. And the challenge will be there, I think. The economical crisis is so prevalent right now, and it will be for the next year at least.
I do not see any other questions on the chat. Does anyone else have any other questions for Javier? Oh, there we go. Can you share some examples of how coronavirus is impacting the many grassroots organizations that ICADS works with and their ability to sustain their activities, provide social services or assistance?
Yeah. This is a very important question. I mean, the crisis for us has been very, very hard. We have very strong relationship with a lot of organizations, and we have been trying to be creative with this organization, try to provide some kind of resources for them, which is difficult in this moment. I really appreciate the effort that GESI is doing. You guys have been doing an amazing work with us. And we really, I applaud you. I really value the way that we understand partnership. And in the same way that we have been a very good partner with us, we are trying to be the same with the organizations that we partner. But the situation is difficult. It's difficult for everybody in the country. Some of these organizations probably won't survive to this situation. It's a real crisis. To talk about pandemic in terms of numbers, it doesn't mean anything for me. But when we transform this conversation in terms of people, there's a lot of people suffering. We are very privileged people because we are bothered by this situation, but we really don't have been suffering in the way that many people is suffering right now. And we are trying to do our best with this organization, but sadly, I think some of them won't survive this crisis.
Gotcha. I think that is all the questions, unless somebody has one that they want to send. Let's give another round of applause for Javier. We can do virtual rounds of applause since some people are muted. I think, is the poll launching? Can you guys see the poll? Yeah, if you could fill out this poll for us, we'd love to get your feedback on this. But yeah, thank you for joining for this week's GLOVicariously webinar. Once you fill out the poll, feel free to leave. Once again, thank you, Javier. Please join us again to hear from another fantastic speaker next week on the topic of health in South Africa. Enjoy the rest of the day. Take care and thanks.
Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.